The coffee mug shattered against the kitchen floor at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and that's when Elena Martinez knew something was terribly wrong. Her husband, David, never broke things. In their 8 years of marriage, he'd been the steady one. The man who caught falling glasses before they hit the ground, who triple-checked the stove before bed, who kissed their daughters' foreheads every single morning before leaving for his construction job. But that morning, his hands had been shaking so badly that the mug, the one with "World's Best Dad" that 4-year-old Sophie had picked out, slipped right through his fingers. David. Elena had set down the pan of scrambled eggs, concern tightening her chest. "Baby, what's wrong?" He'd stared at the broken ceramic, at the coffee spreading across the linoleum like dark blood, and his face had gone completely white. Not pale white. The color of shock, of fear, of something Elena couldn't name but could feel crawling up her spine with icy fingers. "I have to go," he'd whispered. "Go where?" "Work doesn't start until." "I have to go. Now." His brown eyes, usually so warm and full of laughter, had looked straight through her. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Elena. I love you. I love the girls. Please remember that. No matter what happens, remember I love you." Then he grabbed his keys and walked out the door of their small 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, and Elena Martinez never saw her husband again. That was 3 years ago. Now, Elena stood outside a mansion in the Hamptons that probably cost more than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes, her cleaning supplies heavy in her arms and heavier in her heart. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, the same pep talk she'd given herself every morning since David disappeared. "For Sophie. For Isabella. You can do anything for them." The truth was, she'd had to do everything for them. When David vanished without a trace, Elena's carefully constructed life had collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. The police had found his truck abandoned at a rest stop on the New Jersey Turnpike. No signs of foul play. No body. No clues. Just nothing. David Martinez had evaporated into thin air, leaving behind a wife, 2 daughters, and a mountain of questions that kept Elena awake at night. The first month, she'd been paralyzed by shock and hope, certain he'd come back, certain there was an explanation. The second month, the bills started piling up. By the third month, she'd lost their apartment. Social services had almost taken her girls. That's when Elena had discovered she'd do absolutely anything. Scrub toilets, clean up after strangers, work 3 jobs on 3 hours of sleep, to keep Sophie and Isabella safe. 3 years later, she was still scrubbing toilets. But at least her daughters were with her, living in a studio apartment above a bodega in the Bronx, eating meals that Elena sometimes skipped so they could have seconds. "Mrs. Martinez?" A crisp voice interrupted her thoughts. Elena turned to find an elegant woman in her 50s standing in the mansion's doorway, her silver hair pulled back in a perfect chignon, her cream pantsuit probably worth more than Elena's monthly rent. "Yes, Mrs. Thornton. I'm from Pristine Services." Elena forced her most professional smile, the one that hid the exhaustion and the grief and the constant, gnawing fear. "Come in. I'll show you what needs to be done." Mrs. Thornton's tone wasn't unkind, but it carried the casual authority of someone who'd spent her entire life being served rather than serving. "My son is working from home today, so please be quiet around his office on the 2nd floor. He's particular about his space." Elena nodded, following the woman into a foyer that could have fit her entire apartment twice over. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, artwork that probably belonged in museums. This was a different world. A world where people didn't worry about electric bills or whether their kids' shoes would last another month. A world where husbands didn't just disappear. The work was hard but familiar. Elena had cleaned dozens of houses like this over the past 3 years, scrubbing away the evidence of lives lived in luxury, while her own life remained frozen in the moment David walked out the door. She'd learned not to look too closely at family photos on the walls. They only reminded her of what she'd lost. She'd learned not to wonder about the people who lived in these pristine spaces. She'd learned to be invisible, efficient, forgettable. But today, something felt different. Maybe it was the way Mrs. Thornton kept glancing at her with an odd expression, something between pity and knowledge? Maybe it was the eerie silence of the house, too quiet for a home this large. Or maybe it was just Elena's own exhausted mind playing tricks on her. By early afternoon, Elena had cleaned the entire 1st floor and most of the bedrooms. Only the mysterious son's office remained. "You can clean it now," Mrs. Thornton said, appearing suddenly in the hallway. "He's gone out for lunch. Just be careful with the papers on his desk. Don't move anything." Elena nodded and climbed the stairs, her supplies clinking softly. The office door stood slightly ajar, and she pushed it open. The room was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, built-in bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, a massive mahogany desk that gleamed in the afternoon sun. But Elena barely noticed the luxury. Her eyes locked on a photograph sitting on a side table. Her blood turned to ice. The photograph showed a man on a yacht, champagne glass raised in a toast, designer sunglasses reflecting the sun. He wore an expensive suit, his hair styled differently than she remembered, his smile confident and carefree. But Elena would have recognized that smile anywhere. She'd fallen in love with that smile 11 years ago when a handsome construction worker had helped her change a flat tire in the rain. The man in the photograph was her missing husband, David Martinez. The room spun. Elena grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. No, it couldn't be. It was impossible. David was gone. Missing. The police had investigated. She'd hired a private detective, spent money she didn't have, and found nothing. David Martinez didn't exist anymore. He'd vanished. But there he was, frozen in glossy photograph paper, looking healthier and happier than he'd been in months before his disappearance. And he wasn't in some distant country or dangerous situation. He was here. In the Hamptons. Living in a mansion. Drinking champagne on yachts. While Elena had been cleaning houses to feed their children. Her hands shook as she picked up the photograph, studying every detail. It was definitely David. Same strong jawline, same slightly crooked nose from a basketball injury in high school, same scar above his left eyebrow from when 5-year-old Sophie had accidentally hit him with a toy truck. But the clothes were wrong. The setting was wrong. Everything about this life was wrong. What are you doing? Elena's head snapped up. A man stood in the doorway, his body rigid with anger. He wore jeans and a cashmere sweater, casual clothes that probably cost more than her car. His hair was different, darker somehow, styled with expensive products. He'd lost weight, gained muscle. He looked polished, refined, wealthy. But underneath it all, Elena saw him. David. Her husband. The father of her children. The man who'd promised to love her until death did them part. The man who'd abandoned them. David. Her voice came out as a broken whisper. His face went white, the same deathly white as that morning 3 years ago when he dropped the coffee mug. For a split second, Elena saw recognition flash in his eyes. Pain. Fear. Something that looked almost like love. Then his expression shuttered closed like a steel door slamming. I don't know who you are, he said coldly, but my name is not David. It's Alexander Thornton. And you're fired. Get out of my house. David, please. Get out. His shout echoed through the mansion. Security. We have an intruder. Elena heard footsteps pounding up the stairs. Heavy footsteps. Men's voices. She looked at her husband, at this stranger wearing her husband's face, and saw nothing but ice in his eyes. No recognition. No love. No remorse. Just a cold, hard stranger who wanted her gone. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway, large men with earpieces and stern expressions. This woman is trespassing, Alexander Thornton, David said. Remove her from the property. Immediately. Wait, Elena pleaded, reaching for him. Sophie and Isabella. Our daughters. They need you. I need you. Please, David. I don't know those names. His voice could have frozen fire. I don't know you. You're clearly confused or mentally unstable. Security now. The guards grabbed her arms, not roughly but firmly, and Elena's cleaning supplies clattered to the floor. As they dragged her toward the stairs, she twisted around for one last look. David, Alexander, stood in the doorway of his office, his face carved from marble, his eyes empty of anything she recognized. I know it's you, she said, her voice breaking. I know it's you, David Martinez. And I'm going to find out why you left us. I'm going to find out the truth. Something flickered across his face then, so quick she almost missed it. Fear? Regret? A silent apology? Then it was gone, and he turned away, disappearing into his office and closing the door with a soft, final click. The security guards escorted Elena through the mansion, through the foyer with its crystal chandeliers, out the front door into the bright sunshine that suddenly felt too harsh, too real. They deposited her next to her 15-year-old Honda with its cracked windshield and rusting bumper, a stark contrast to the Porsche and Mercedes parked in the circular driveway. Don't come back, one of the guards said, not unkindly. Mrs. Thornton is calling the police if you try. Then they left her there, alone with her broken cleaning supplies and her shattered world. Elena sat in her car for a long time, her hands gripping the steering wheel, her whole body shaking. She should drive away. She should go pick up Sophie and Isabella from school, Go home to their tiny apartment, forget she'd ever seen that photograph.
But she couldn't.
Because the man in that house, Alexander Thornton, with his designer clothes and his ocean view office and his champagne lifestyle, was her husband. The father of her children. The love of her life who'd kissed her goodbye one Tuesday morning and never came home. And now Elena knew he was alive. Not missing. Not dead. Not kidnapped or suffering from amnesia or any of the thousand scenarios that had played through her mind during the endless nights of the past 3 years.
He was here.
Living a life of luxury while she scrubbed toilets and skipped meals and lied to their daughters about why daddy hadn't sent birthday cards. Elena pulled out her phone with trembling hands and called the one person who might understand.
Rosa? It's Elena. I found him.
I found David. Her best friend's gasp was audible even over the phone.
What? Where? How?
He's been in the Hamptons. Living in a mansion. Pretending to be someone else.
Elena's voice cracked.
He looked at me like I was a stranger, Rosa. Like Sophie and Isabella never existed. Like our entire life together meant nothing.
Oh my God.
Elena, what are you going to do? Elena looked up at the mansion, at the life her husband had built without her, and felt something shift inside her chest.
Not just grief anymore.
Not just confusion.
Determination.
White-hot and unbreakable. I'm going to find out why, she said. I'm going to find out what made David Martinez fake his own disappearance and become Alexander Thornton. And I'm going to make him face what he left behind.
Be careful, Rosa warned.
If he went to these lengths to disappear. He owes me answers. He owes Sophie and Isabella a father. Elena started her car, the engine coughing before catching. He owes us the truth. As she drove away from the mansion, Elena caught a glimpse of movement in an upstairs window. A figure standing there, watching her leave. David.
Or Alexander.
Or whoever the hell he was now. Elena didn't know what she was going to do yet. She didn't have a plan, didn't have resources, didn't have anything except 3 years of grief and rage and desperate love for the man who'd thrown them all away. But she was going to find out why. No matter what it took. No matter what secrets she had to uncover. No matter what it cost her. Because somewhere under the designer clothes and the fake name and the cold empty eyes was the man who'd held her hand during labor. The man who'd cried when Sophie took her first steps. The man who'd slow danced with her in their tiny kitchen to a radio playing old love songs. That man was still in there. Elena just had to find him. And if he'd truly abandoned them by choice, if there was no terrible secret, no impossible circumstance, no desperate reason that could justify what he'd done, then Elena would make sure David Martinez faced every single consequence of breaking their family apart. She would get her answers. Even if she had to tear down his entire perfect fake life to find them. Elena didn't go home that night. She couldn't face Sophie's gap-toothed smile or Isabella's innocent questions about why mommy looked so sad. She couldn't walk into their cramped studio apartment and pretend that the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. So instead, she called Rosa and asked her to pick up the girls from school, then drove to the only place that had ever brought her peace, the small public beach in the Bronx where David had proposed 9 years ago. The water was gray and choppy, mirroring the storm inside her chest. Elena sat on a bench that had probably been new when her grandparents were young, staring at the waves and trying to make sense of the impossible. David was alive. Alive. Living under a different name, in a different world, as if Elena and their daughters had never existed. How was that possible?
Her phone buzzed.
A text from Rosa, "Girls are with me. Fed and doing homework. Take all the time you need, Mija. I love you." Elena's eyes burned with tears she'd been holding back since the security guards had escorted her out of the mansion. Rosa had been her lifeline these past 3 years, helping with childcare, lending money she probably couldn't spare, sitting up with Elena through the worst nights when the grief threatened to swallow her whole. But even Rosa couldn't help her now. This was something Elena had to face alone. She pulled out her laptop, a battered thing she'd bought at a pawn shop 2 years ago, and opened it on her knees. The Wi-Fi from a nearby coffee shop was weak but functional. Elena typed with shaking fingers, "Alexander Thornton Hamptons." The search results made her stomach drop. Alexander Thornton wasn't just some random wealthy person. He was a titan of commercial real estate, the founder and CEO of Thornton Development Corporation, worth an estimated $800 million. His company had built half the luxury high-rises in Manhattan over the past 3 years.
3 years.
The exact amount of time since David disappeared. Elena clicked through article after article, her heart pounding harder with each new piece of information. There were photos of Alexander at charity galas, at ribbon-cutting ceremonies, at business conferences. Always in expensive suits, always with that confident smile, always looking like he belonged in that world of wealth and power. Nothing about him suggested David Martinez, the construction worker from Queens who'd never finished college, who'd worked 60-hour weeks to support his family, who'd been struggling with debt and stress in the months before he vanished.
But it was him.
Elena knew her husband's face, knew the way he held himself, knew the small details that makeup and styling couldn't hide. The scar above his eyebrow. The slight crook in his nose. The way his left eye crinkled more than his right when he smiled. It was David. Somehow, impossibly, it was him. But who the hell is Alexander Thornton? Elena whispered to herself. She dug deeper, searching for any information about Alexander's background. According to his company bio, he'd grown up in Connecticut, attended Yale, spent a decade working in commercial real estate in California before returning to the East Coast to start his own firm.
All lies. They had to be. Unless...
Elena's blood ran cold. What if David had been living a double life all along? What if the construction worker, the loving husband, the devoted father? What if all of that had been the lie?
No.
She shook her head violently.
No, that's impossible.
She'd known David since they were both 19. They'd met at a community college in Queens, fallen in love over shared dreams and late-night study sessions. She'd watched him work his way up from apprentice to foreman, watched him come home exhausted and covered in drywall dust, watched him scrimp and save for Sophie's birthday presents. That couldn't have been fake. Their entire life couldn't have been a performance.
Could it?
Elena searched for marriage records, birth certificates, anything that would prove David Martinez had existed. She found their marriage certificate easily enough, filed in Queens, dated May 15, 2016. Sophie's birth certificate from 2019. Isabella's from 2021.
All real. All documented.
So how had David Martinez become Alexander Thornton? By the time Elena finally drove home, it was after midnight. The girls were asleep in Rosa's apartment across the hall, and Elena was grateful for the temporary solitude. She needed time to think, to process, to figure out her next move.
But sleep wouldn't come.
She lay on the pull-out couch that served as her bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, her mind racing through possibilities.
Identity theft?
Had someone stolen David's identity after he disappeared? But the man she'd seen was David, his face, his body, his mannerisms.
Witness protection?
Had David witnessed something terrible, something that forced him into hiding? But then why would he be living openly as a wealthy businessman? Why not change his appearance more dramatically?
Amnesia?
Could he have genuinely forgotten who he was? But he'd looked at her with such cold certainty when he denied knowing her. That hadn't been confusion, it had been deliberate rejection. Around 3 a.m., Elena's phone rang.
Unknown number.
She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Mrs. Martinez? A woman's voice, cultured and smooth.
This is Catherine Thornton.
I believe you met my son today. Elena sat bolt upright, her heart hammering.
Mrs. Thornton.
I'm calling to apologize for the unpleasantness earlier. My son can be quite protective of his privacy.
A pause.
But I think perhaps you and I should talk.
Face to face. Why?
Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Because, Mrs. Martinez, I think we both know my son is lying about something. And I'd very much like to know what.
Another pause, heavier this time.
How about breakfast tomorrow? There's a small diner in the Bronx, Rosie's, I believe it's called? I'll meet you there at 9. How do you know where I live? I have resources. Mrs. Thornton's tone wasn't threatening, just matter of fact. 9 o'clock, Mrs. Martinez. I promise you'll want to hear what I have to say. She hung up before Elena could respond. Elena stared at her phone, adrenaline surging through her exhausted body. Catherine Thornton, Alexander's mother, if the family photo Elena had glimpsed in the mansion was accurate, wanted to meet with her. Wanted to talk about Alexander's lies.
Did she know?
Did she know that Alexander Thornton was really David Martinez? And if she did, why was she reaching out? Shocking revelation. Elena barely slept the rest of the night. When 8:30 rolled around, she'd already dropped the girls at school, kissed their foreheads a dozen times, and promised Sophie they'd have movie night that evening even though Elena's mind was 1,000 miles away. Rosie's Diner was a hole-in-the-wall place that had been serving the neighborhood since before Elena was born. Cracked vinyl booths, coffee that tasted like motor oil, and a jukebox that only played songs from the 1970s. It was the last place Elena would have expected to meet a Hamptons socialite. But at exactly 9 a.m., Catherine Thornton walked through the door in designer jeans and a cashmere coat that probably cost more than Elena's car, looking completely out of place and somehow entirely comfortable at the same time. Mrs. Martinez. She slid into the booth across from Elena. Thank you for meeting me. Up close, Catherine Thornton was even more elegant than she'd seemed at the mansion. Silver hair, sharp blue eyes, perfect posture. But there were lines around those eyes that spoke of worry, and her hands trembled slightly as she ordered coffee from the waitress. Why am I here? Elena asked, too tired for pleasantries. Catherine studied her for a long moment. My son has been lying to me for 3 years. And yesterday when I saw your face, the way you looked at him, the names you said, I realized his lies might be bigger than I thought.
Elena's heart raced. What do you mean?
Alexander appeared in my life 3 years ago, claiming to be the son I gave up for adoption 35 years ago. Catherine's voice was steady, but Elena could hear the emotion underneath. I was young, unmarried, pressured by my family. I've regretted it every day since. So when this man showed up with documentation, with DNA evidence, with memories that only my son could know, I believed him. The diner seemed to tilt. DNA evidence?
Positive match.
I had it verified by 3 separate labs. Catherine took a sip of her coffee, her hands still trembling. Alexander is my biological son. That much is true. Elena's mind reeled.
I don't understand. If he's your son,
that doesn't mean he's not also your husband. The words hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to explode.
What? Elena breathed. Catherine leaned forward.
Tell me about David Martinez. Tell me everything.
So Elena did.
She told this stranger about meeting David at community college, about their whirlwind romance, about their small wedding in her mother's backyard. She told her about Sophie and Isabella, about the tiny apartment they'd been so happy in, about David's construction job and his dreams of starting his own company someday. She told her about that terrible Tuesday morning, about the shattered coffee mug, about 3 years of grief and struggling and barely surviving. And Catherine Thornton listened to every word, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. When Elena finally finished, Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Then she opened her designer handbag and pulled out a photograph. This was taken at Alexander's office last month, she said, sliding it across the table. Look at the background. Elena picked up the photo.
It showed Alexander.
David, at his desk, smiling at the camera. But behind him, partially visible on a shelf, was a small stuffed bear. Elena's blood turned to ice.
Mr. Fuzzy, she whispered. It was Sophie's bear.
The one David had won for her at a carnival when she was 2. The one Sophie had cried over when it went missing the week before David disappeared. The one Elena had torn apart their apartment searching for. It was sitting in Alexander Thornton's office. You recognize it, Catherine said. It wasn't a question. It's my daughter's toy. It went missing right before David, before my husband vanished. Elena looked up, her eyes burning. Why would he have it? Why would he keep it all this time if he was trying to erase us from his existence? Because, Catherine said softly, I don't think he wanted to erase you. I think he was forced to. The revelation sat between them like a living thing.
What do you mean, forced? Elena demanded. Forced by who? Why?
Catherine hesitated, something flickering across her face.
Fear? Guilt?
I need to show you something.
But not here.
Can you come with me? Every instinct screamed at Elena to be careful, not to trust this woman, not to walk into another trap.
But the stuffed bear haunted her.
David had kept it. Despite everything, despite his new life and his new identity, he'd kept their daughter's toy. That meant something.
It had to. Where? Elena asked.
My penthouse in Manhattan.
I have documents.
Information about my son, about both my sons, it seems, that you need to see. Elena thought of Sophie and Isabella, safe at school for another 6 hours. Thought of Rosa, who could pick them up if Elena was late. Thought of 3 years of questions that might finally have answers.
Okay, she said.
But I'm telling someone where I'm going. And if anything happens to me, nothing will happen to you. Catherine's voice was firm. I promise you that, Mrs. Martinez. Whatever Alexander, David, is caught up in, I want to help him. And I think you might be the key to doing that. Catherine Thornton's penthouse overlooked Central Park and probably cost more per month than Elena would earn in her lifetime. But Elena barely noticed the luxury. Her attention was fixed on the banker's box Catherine set on the coffee table between them. I've been investigating my son, Catherine said quietly. Not because I doubted he was mine, the DNA is conclusive. But because there were things that didn't add up. Gaps in his story. Moments when I'd catch him looking at his phone with this desperate expression. Like he was waiting for a call that never came. She opened the box and pulled out a thick file folder. 3 months ago, I hired a private investigator. I know, she added, seeing Elena's expression. It's a terrible invasion of privacy. But I'm his mother, and I could tell something was wrong. Something beyond just finding me after all these years. Catherine handed Elena the folder. Inside were photographs, documents, financial records. And there, paper-clipped to the front, was a birth certificate. Name, Alexander David Thornton. Born, March 15, 1990. Mother, Catherine and Thornton. Father, unknown. March 15, 1990, Elena read aloud. Then froze. That's David's birthday. My David. He was born March 15, 1990. Catherine nodded slowly. Keep reading. Elena flipped through the pages, her hands shaking. There were adoption records showing that baby Alexander had been placed with a family named Martinez in Queens. Medical records. School transcripts. And then she found it. A photograph of a young couple holding a newborn baby. The man was smiling proud. The woman looked exhausted but happy. And written on the back in faded ink, Carlos and Maria Martinez with their new son, David Alexander Martinez. March 20th, 1990. Oh my God, Elena breathed. David was adopted. He was your biological son all along. Yes. Catherine's voice was thick with emotion. I gave up my baby, and he was adopted by the Martinez family. They renamed him David. He grew up never knowing about me, never knowing he'd been given up. Elena's mind raced. But then 3 years ago, how did he find out? What made him leave his family, our family, to become Alexander Thornton? Catherine pulled out another document. This one was a letter, handwritten on expensive stationery. This was sent to David's construction site 3 years and 2 months ago, Catherine said. My investigator found copies of it in Alexander's personal safe. Elena read with growing horror. Mr. Martinez. You don't know me, but I'm someone who knows the truth about who you really are. You are not David Martinez, son of construction workers. You are Alexander Thornton, heir to the Thornton fortune. Your biological mother, Catherine Thornton, has been searching for you. But there's a problem. Catherine's late husband, your stepfather, left his entire estate in a complex trust. According to the terms, if Catherine's biological child is ever found and verified, that child inherits everything. We're talking about $2 billion in assets, Mr. Martinez. However, there are people who stand to lose everything if you claim your inheritance. Dangerous people. People who have already proven they're willing to kill to protect what they believe is theirs. Your family is in danger. Your wife. Your daughters. If you don't disappear, if you don't become Alexander Thornton and cut all ties with your former life, they will be eliminated. All of them. You have 72 hours to decide. Make the right choice, Mr. Martinez. Or make funeral arrangements. The letter wasn't signed. Elena read it 3 times, her vision blurring with tears. He left to protect us, she whispered. David left to keep Sophie and Isabella and me safe. It appears so. Catherine's voice was gentle. But here's what I don't understand. The letter mentions my late husband's estate, but my husband died 15 years ago. The estate was settled long ago. There is no complex trust. No inheritance battle. No fortune that Alexander would be threatening by existing. Elena looked up sharply. Then the letter was a lie? Partially, at least. Yes, Alexander is my biological son and would be my heir. But there's no one who would lose a fortune because of that. My other children, Alexander's half-siblings, have their own trusts, their own wealth. None of them would benefit from him staying hidden. Then who sent the letter? Elena demanded. Who threatened my family? Who forced David to give up his entire life? Catherine's expression was grim. That's what we need to find out. Because whoever it was convinced David that his only option was to disappear. And they did such a thorough job of it that even when you found him yesterday, he couldn't, or wouldn't, acknowledge you. Elena thought back to the moment in the office, to the flash of recognition and pain in David's eyes before he'd gone cold. He was afraid, she said slowly. When I said Sophie and Isabella's names, he looked terrified. Not angry. Not confused. Terrified. Because, Catherine said, if the person who sent that letter finds out David has had contact with you, they might make good on their threat. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She thought of Sophie, singing off-key while she colored. Isabella, who still slept with a nightlight because she was afraid of the dark. Her beautiful, innocent daughters who had no idea their father had sacrificed everything to keep them safe. What do we do? Elena asked, her voice breaking. How do we fix this? Catherine stood and walked to the window, her silhouette framed against the Manhattan skyline. We find out who sent that letter. We find out what they really want. And we bring my son, your husband, back from whatever hell he's been living in for the past 3 years. She turned back to Elena, and for the first time, Elena saw not a wealthy socialite but a mother who'd lost her child twice, once to adoption, once to a cruel deception. But we have to be careful, Catherine warned. If David has stayed away from you for 3 years despite clearly still loving you, keeping your daughter's toy, living in misery despite all his wealth, then he believes the threat is real. And we can't risk proving him right. Elena nodded, a fierce determination settling over her grief. Tell me what to do. Catherine smiled, and it was a warrior's smile. First, we need to find out everything we can about the people in my late husband's orbit 3 years ago. Someone who would benefit from keeping Alexander's identity secret. Someone with the resources to threaten a construction worker and his family. She pulled out a laptop and opened a file. Second, we need to get close to Alexander without raising suspicion. You can't go back to the mansion, security will stop you. But perhaps there's another way. What way? Elena asked. Catherine's smile grew wider, sharper. My son's company is hosting a charity gala next week. 500 guests, all of Manhattan's elite. I can get you in as my guest. You'll be right there in the same room as David, and he won't be able to ignore you without causing a scene. He'll recognize me. He'll have me thrown out. Not if you look different. Catherine studied Elena with an appraising eye. Some professional styling, a designer dress, different makeup and hair. You won't be Elena Martinez, the maid. You'll be Elena Martinez, the woman who refuses to let her husband go. Elena's heart raced. A week. She had 1 week to prepare for the most important confrontation of her life. What if he still won't talk to me? She asked quietly. What if he's too afraid of putting us in danger? Catherine's expression softened. Then we make him see that the danger of staying apart is worse than any threat. Because whoever sent that letter, whoever is manipulating my son, they've already destroyed your family once. We won't let them do it again. Elena left the penthouse 3 hours later with a plan, a phone number for Catherine's private investigator, and a ball gown that cost more than her rent for 6 months. Her head spun with information, with possibilities, with a hope she'd thought was dead. David hadn't abandoned them. He'd sacrificed himself to save them. And now Elena was going to save him right back. But as she drove back to the Bronx, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stay away from Alexander Thornton. This is your only warning. If you value your daughter's lives, you'll forget you ever saw him. Elena's hands tightened on the steering wheel, fear and fury warring in her chest. Someone was watching her. Someone knew she'd found David. And that someone was willing to threaten her children to keep them apart. Elena's hands were still shaking when she pulled up to Rosa's apartment building. The threatening text message burned into her mind like a brand. If you value your daughter's lives, you'll forget you ever saw him. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, watching the street, searching for any sign that someone was following her. Every pedestrian looked suspicious. Every parked car could be hiding a threat. The paranoia that David must have lived with for 3 years was already wrapping around her like barbed wire. But she couldn't let fear paralyze her. Not now. Not when she finally understood why David had left. Elena took a deep breath, grabbed her purse, which now contained a canister of pepper spray Catherine had insisted she take, and headed upstairs. She knocked on Rosa's door using their special pattern, 3 quick raps, pause, 2 more. Their code since they were teenagers, a silly game that had somehow become a comfort ritual. Rosa opened the door immediately, her dark eyes scanning Elena's face. Mija, you look like you've seen a ghost. Come in, come in. The girls are watching cartoons. Inside, Sophie and Isabella were curled up on Rosa's worn couch, giggling at something on the TV. They looked so innocent, so safe, so blissfully unaware that someone had just threatened their lives. Elena's chest tightened with a fierce, primal protectiveness. Mommy. Sophie bounced up, her pigtails flying. Can we have pizza for dinner? Rosa said she'd order if you said yes. Please, Mommy. Isabella added, her brown eyes, David's eyes, wide and hopeful. With extra cheese? Elena forced a smile, crouching down to hug them both.
Of course, my loves.
Extra cheese pizza it is. As the girls returned to their cartoons, Rosa pulled Elena into the kitchen. What happened? She whispered urgently. You look terrified. Elena showed her the text message. Rosa's face went pale.
Dios mío.
Elena, you need to go to the police.
And tell them what?
That my missing husband is actually a billionaire living under his birth name, and someone threatened me via text. Elena laughed bitterly. They'd think I was insane. Besides, whoever sent this made David disappear 3 years ago without leaving a trace. The police couldn't find him then. What makes you think they could protect us now? Then what are you going to do? Elena thought of the charity gala, of Catherine Thornton's plan, of the slim chance she had to get close to David and make him see reason. I'm going to find out who's doing this. And I'm going to stop them.
How? Rosa demanded. You're a house cleaner, Elena.
These people, whoever they are, have money, power, resources. They made a man vanish into thin air. They're threatening to kill children. How are you supposed to fight that? It was a fair question. Elena had no money, no connections, no skills beyond scrubbing floors and stretching food stamps.
She was nobody. Nothing.
Except she was a mother who would burn the world down to protect her children. And she was a wife who refused to let her husband suffer alone.
I don't know yet, Elena admitted. But I have help.
Catherine Thornton, David's biological mother, she's on my side. She has resources, investigators, money. Together, we can figure this out. Rosa grabbed Elena's hands. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't take unnecessary risks. Those girls need their mother.
I promise.
Elena squeezed back. But Rosa, can you do something for me? If anything happens, if I don't come home one night, if something seems wrong, there's an envelope in my underwear drawer. It has Catherine's number, copies of documents, everything about David and Alexander Thornton.
Take it to the police. Make them listen.
You're scaring me.
Good. Be scared. Stay alert.
Watch the girls.
Elena's voice hardened.
Because someone out there is willing to kill to keep secrets buried, and I need to know my babies are safe while I dig them up.